Hi, I'm Phil Bainbridge, and this is a quick demo video for the blog post to convert sheet data into a JavaScript object for easier handling. A little bit of a mouthful. So let's have a look at what we've got. We've got a Google Sheet, and we've got some dummy made-up data here, and we've got a clearly defined header row at the top. Now, typically, what we might do when we're first learning a Google Apps script is we get the spreadsheet, we get the data range, get the values, loop through that as a 2D array, and use our column positions. So typically in an array, we're starting at 0, 1, 2, 3, for instance. So we're kind of remembering which column position some bit of data is in so that we can extract that. However, we have a different way of handling the data by running it through a function which will allow us to create a JavaScript object. That being, it will associate the data itself with a particular name. So creating a name value pair as such. What does that look like then? Here's the app script that we've got. We start with our parent function, just called getPrettyData. So as we've been used to doing, we still get our spreadsheet, and we still get all of our data from the spreadsheet in one go. We then extract the header row. So I've just got the one header row in this data here, and I'm going to store that in a variable. So we're just using the JavaScript method of shift. We're then going to call a function, which is just called Objectify in this instance. That's the name it's been given. We're going to pass in our header row. So that's row 1 here. We're going to pass those values in, as well as all of the sheet data that we have. So let's jump to that function itself. So here we're just going to do some looping through. So this is going to happen quite quickly, and it's going to happen manually it's going to happen automatically for us. We're going to create an empty array where we're going to eventually push our new JavaScript objects to in at the very end here. And that's what we're going to return to our parent function. But what have we got going on? Well, we've got two loops. First of all, we've got a loop here, which is actually looping through all of our rows of data. Because what we need to do is we need to start pairing these up with the headers. So we need to go through each row one by one. So that's all we're doing here in a for loop. We're creating an empty JavaScript object, just using our curly braces as opposed to our square braces. We get the row of data, so we pass it all of the data, and we get one specific row at a time. So for instance, we start at row 2, 3, etc. So we're just looping through row by row in this particular instance. Now, inside of that loop, we're going to create a second loop, which is then going to run through our header rows that we've passed in. So for ease of splitting it all out, I'm going to capture the variable of the name of the header row here. So you could log that if you want to see what's happening. But basically at this point here, it's grabbing each name in turn. So it's starting with student ID, then going to surname, forename, and it's doing that for that row first, and then to the second row, third row, etc. for all of the data that you've got. So here is where it's creating that name value pair between our header and data value. So that object that we created up here, we're now making use of it to push those two items in together. Well, we're putting the items in there, and then we're going to push them in down here. So this all happens in a loop. It all happens automatically. All you need to do, if we jump back to the parent function, is get your data and get your header row specifically. What does that look like then in terms of extracting and using the data? So once we've run that function and we've returned a variable called niceArray, we're now going to loop through that. So we're going to loop through all of our rows in our spreadsheet. And we're going to start by getting an individual row of data. So I've just created a variable called row of data. So at this point here, we are now starting here. We're getting that entire row all in one go. And our aim is we want to now extract a specific piece of information from it. So there's two ways of doing this. Let's start with surname first as an example. We can take our row of data that we've got here and call our object property with a full stop and then the name now of our header. And our header there was surname. So here's where it's different to the traditional 2D array approach, where you're kind of looking at the position of surname and saying that's 0, 1, and I need to insert it. You now get to use a nice name. The second way of doing this, for instance, is by separating it out in square brackets and putting the actual title of the header name inside single or double quotes, so that it's a text string. So again, we've got the row of data and we use our square brackets. This way is more effective if you've got a header title which has spaces in it, because that won't work up here. But at the end of the day, they both get us to the same place. So what we're doing now is we're looping through. Surname is Jones, college name is Fairbridge. So you see we've got the first one, Jones, Fairbridge. The next one will be Barnes and Langwent. So we've got Barnes and Langwent, and that's just looping through, showing you how it is. The biggest benefit of working like this comes when you need to move some columns around or insert some columns or delete them. In the traditional approach, you now have to go and recount which position in an array college name had been moved to. But in this instance, it doesn't matter because of the way we've now created a JavaScript object with a name value pair. So if I run that again, it's completely unaffected and still pulls the same data through. Similarly, if we were to delete any columns, so let's get rid of these two, run that again, it's unaffected. Okay. The thing to be aware of that is affected this time, however, if you change a column heading, you will need to change this in the relevant spot in your code as well. Thank you very much.